What's my fantastic squad? Your boy SatAttack. Well, no, y'all see the title, man. Dan Schneider's a creep, man. By the boy Mr. Penguin. Why I say Mr. but Penguin 0. But I see a couple of videos of him going, I'm not saying viral, but going around on TikTok of behind the scenes between Victoria's, iCarly and shit, and the actors just acting weird around it. I always knew he was like a weirdo, but I feel like he's getting more steam lately, so I don't know what's going on, but we're gonna check this out. We watched the Vince McMahon by Penguin 0 like a couple weeks ago. That shit was eye-opening. This is a 14-minute video. Let's get into Road 2K. Let's get it.
During the 90s or the early 2000s,
man. Help brother out.
There's an extremely high chance that you watch some of Dan Schneider's shows.
Yes,
it was like impossible to avoid him. It'd be like trying to dodge raindrops during a thunderstorm. Dan Schneider during this period was the king of children's television programs. He made some of the most influential productions like Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show, iCarly. His resume is just stacked with tons of shows that I imagine meant a lot to many of you growing up. And make no mistake, you meant a lot to the creator of these shows as well. Well, not so much you, but your feet certainly did. The creator of these shows is a monstrous foot fetishist, Dan Get in the Van Schneider. He is a vile, creepy, disgusting human being, and this has been known for years. However,
yeah, I feel like we've known he's been a weirdo for a couple years now, but I feel like it's getting like more steam lately. I don't know why.
Docuseries just dropped, really diving into this subject matter and putting a spotlight on it in a way that hasn't previously been explored. It's called Quiet on Set. Now, if you don't know what Dan looks like, here's a nice picture of him here. He looks like he was made in the Dragon's Dogma 2 character creator. And Dan Schneider has become the face of Quiet on Set. However, it actually explores more than that. It's like a whole deep look at all of the horrible things that were going on during these Nickelodeon productions. It's more than just Dan, but he obviously plays a central role here because he made these shows. He was the head honcho of most of this, and he was well aware of some of these terrible and downright criminal things that were going on behind the scenes on some of these shows. And the reason I mentioned the foot fetishism off rip here is because that was one of the first things that people really caught on to in the public eye. After Dan's glory days at Nickelodeon, people started to pick up on how odd it was that a lot of these children's shows had an emphasis on feet. Pretty frequently, it was a common thread throughout a lot of these shows, like feet humor and having these child actors.
That's crazy. Like, I'm doing
and actresses on displaying their feet. And in 2013, one of the shows
I remember right on the bottom. I remember an episode of iCarly too where Spencer and
Sam and Cat actually ran a competition where
plot was of it again, but I think he was like had some green shit on his foot or whatever. That was a random ass episode.
Kids were supposed to submit pictures of their feet to them.
What the hell?
That's weird. No matter how you spin it, that's a really weird thing to request from your audience of children, to take pictures of their feet for you. That's just downright creepy.
That's the actual tweet? Wait, that's
to submit
tomorrow, right on the bottom of your foot. Take a bro. That's 2013. I was like, bro,
pictures of their feet to them.
That's crazy.
Like, that's weird. No matter how you spin it, that's a really weird thing to request from your audience of children, to take pictures of their feet for you. That's just downright creepy and wrong. I can't believe that tweet is still up, by the way, over a decade later, and no one thought to delete that. That is impressive. But anyway, people started to pick up on Dan's fixation with stompers, and it seemed like his fetish was bleeding into his work, and he was having the children unknowingly participate in it by having them display their feet. That's what it seemed to a lot of people, so it was obviously very concerning. So people did more and more digging. They found more and more evidence of Dan being an awful piece of shit behind the scenes with a lot of shady things going on there. And it just led to this reputation that people for years have known that Dan blows loads to toes Schneider is not a good person. And now, Quiet on the Set has released, and so much information has come out, not just about Dan, but about that entire Nickelodeon workplace around these child stars. Arguably the largest piece of new information that dropped during this docuseries was the sexual abuse of Drake Bell by someone named Brian Peck.
I did see a little clip of this.
So Brian
I didn't see a clip of it. I just seen like I think I seen like a headline like that.
Was a coach at Nickelodeon whom was sexually abusing Drake Bell. And he was actually convicted in 2004.
Damn.
He spent 16 months in the Slammer, and then immediately upon release, landed a job with Disney. If that doesn't show just how rotten to the core this industry is, I don't know what will. There is deep-seated evil in Hollywood. He went to jail for lewd acts with a minor. He is a sex offender, a convicted sex offender.
And you got him working with, like, not little kids. I was
immediately got a Disney Channel job working on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. What the fuck? That's mind-bogglingly evil. Like that's not just irresponsible, that's malicious. It's not like they just made some kind of mistake where they put a sex offender in a role where he works almost exclusively with children. It's not like they made a whoops-a-daisy, they just happened to overlook that he's a sex offender. They knew. They would have to know, and they still hired him for that role regardless. That's scary. That's terrifying. They're actively enabling a fucking sex offender to potentially prey on more children. Drake also described
Drake and Josh, iCarly, Victoria, Zoe 101. I don't think he's on Zoe. I don't think he did Zoe 101. I'm just saying.
That when he went into court, Brian Peck had the support of some very powerful and familiar faces. There were 41 character letters written to the judge asking for leniency for Brian Peck. 41 letters of support from industry personnel that were trying to get a lighter sentence for Brian Peck, even knowing that he is guilty of the crimes for which he is about to face the punishment, asking for a more generous sentence. These weren't just 41 pieces of toilet paper with nonsensical scribblings on it from nobodies. These were 41 character letters that were submitted by industry personnel, some of whom were high up on the food chain, so these things carried weight. And they're advocating for someone who is guilty of sexually abusing a child.
That's crazy.
Holy shit. They just viewed it as not a big deal, I guess. Listen, Judge, I understand Brian Peck diddled a child. Who at Nickelodeon hasn't? Are you really gonna throw him away or put him away and throw away the key for that? What about season 3 of Drake and Josh? What actually matters here? Let's think about that.
That's crazy.
Like, this is crazy to me. It almost stops being surprising learning that Brian Peck landed a job at Disney right after his 16 months in prison for this crime, because it seems like that entire industry just does not give a fuck about the safety of kids to begin with. So like I said, Quiet on Set isn't just about Dan Schneider and all of the awful things that he has done. It's about how...
Is that a writer, director? Like, I'm not familiar with it. He's a writer, he's a director, whatever, but...
awful that entire industry itself is. But once again, Dan Schneider does still play a large role in this docuseries, highlighting the bad workplace and environment that he would cultivate, the weird shit that would go on in like the writer's room and the way he'd treat some people, just a whole plethora of different bad stuff. And in response to all of this, Dan Schneider himself actually stepped out from the shadows, leaving his little gopher's hidey hole and addressing it head on in one of the most painfully scripted and staged apology video interviews I've ever seen.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played Tebow on Nickelodeon.
Oh, Tebow. Oh, my boy Tebow. You gonna, wow.
Harley. I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. The interview is not conducted by a professional. It's conducted by a former actor in one of Dan Schneider's shows, and he is not equipped to handle something like this. This is the biggest load of baloney. Like, this is just some straight up fucking malarkey. There is no pushback from Boogie on anything in this interview at all. It's just strategic softballs designed to give Dan Schneider some kind of sympathetic PR win here, where he comes out of this looking better, where he comes out of this like not the bad guy. It's so deplorable that they'd even try something like this with a straight face. I think it is extremely transparent.
Damn, I'm just thinking, well, imagine like Dan's not even Dan's, like all these people just watching Penguin's videos of him just roasting him and shit. Like you can't even go at that man because this man got like 16 mil on his account, bro. Like, how do you even respond to Penguin like that? That boy literally exposed, like, not exposed, it's common sense, like, that was obviously a skit, or not a skit, but a way to, like, make his, what the fuck, what's the word? make himself look better. I can't think of the word. I'm stupid. But
and I'm happy to say pretty much everyone saw straight through this. This did not give Dan Schneider the dunk I think he was expecting it to. This did not make him look any better in the public's eye. It actually just made it look even more sinister that he was able to.
Like, I'm just thinking, like, what I was trying to say is, if you get on the other side of Penguin's videos, bro, you're done.
The potential fallout from the
there's no way coming back.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation.
Dan, talk to me about the writer's room. From what I saw, not cool.
No, and I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses.
It starts with what's supposed to be this moment of taking accountability. Dan Schneider's just point blank apologizing and, you know, holding himself accountable for the sins of the past type vibe. Except he's really not. Like, these aren't things that you just, like, hand wave away with, like, a simple apology. A lot of what was reported is, like, unforgivable bad shit. Like, there's really no way of apologizing for the things that Dan Schneider has done and also been accused of. So it's just, it feels so fucking insincere. And Dan Schneider got away with it, and it seems will continue to get away with it. So he loses nothing by doing something like this, which just makes it frustrating to see him parade around pretending like he cares now all of a sudden. Like, it's extremely easy for him to just be like, oh yeah, that was bad. I feel bad for that. Oh, what a regret. Yep, not good. Like, it's just, I would have liked if the interviewer was someone that would legitimately dive into a lot of these things and actually press him on a lot of these things. This interview never even
done an interview doing that, though.
Addresses the things that people want to hear from Dan on, such as like the sexualization of the children in those shows. Even outside of all the foot stuff, Dan included some very inappropriate things in his programs, such as Ariana Grande milking a potato, and then another scene with her getting like splashed with water and shit. Like, all of it was very unacceptable. And seems to sexualize.
Looking back on it is crazy. As a kid, that shit used to be like funny as hell. Not like, cause we didn't know better, but looking back on it, that shit was wild.
The child actors and actresses
now we know the real meaning
in his productions, and that was never even brought up in this interview. So this interview just, it doesn't have any real substance to it. It is legitimately just a scripted PR play from Dan.
I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say, with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it. Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
The last thing I want to ever do is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV. Why would I ever want to do that?
That makes sense.
This is him addressing a question that Boogie asked about, like, inappropriate jokes in there without getting too deep into the weeds, just a broad subject of some of these jokes have aged poorly and people look at them as inappropriate for a child audience. How do you respond? The most softball way of asking this question, mind you, and his response was, cut it. Just get rid of it. I don't want it in the show. If it's aged bad and it makes people uncomfortable or, you know, this and that, cut it. And Boogie's like patting him on the back for it, like, oh my goodness, wow. That's so benevolent. What a great solution. Yeah, that makes sense. What the fuck? It's so easy for him to say that now, but it doesn't take away the fact that you filmed it. If you cut Ariana Grande milking a potato type shit, if you cut some of the foot stuff that you included in there, it doesn't change the fact that you still had the child actors and actresses doing that shit and were sexualizing them. It still happened. That's still bad. Cutting it from the final product doesn't erase what you did.
Talk to him.
It's so frustrating.
Hey, that boy's so frustrated. That boy's stumbling.
It's so frustrating that there's no pushback on this interview. He just gets to let him say his piece and then get applause for it. It's so stupid.
And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. 41 of those people wrote letters for Pat character letters praising him for who he was and asking for leniency, and they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree, and they still did this. But Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, "Would you help me with my speech for the judge?" And I said, "Of course." And I did.
Dan Schneider's fishing for the Nickelodeon's Kid Choice Award for the best fake crying. It feels super forced and super insincere. Him tearing up while talking about this story. This is him talking about the Drake and Brian Peck case, where he mentions 41 people wrote those letters and it baffled him. And then Drake's mom actually asked him to help her write her piece, which he did. And that leads me to a question of, if you knew all this, why didn't you back up Drake Bell? The way it's described, Brian Peck had all of these people in his corner, but Drake really only had his mom and his brother. Why weren't you more involved then? Like, I imagine that could have been extraordinarily helpful. But regardless, this interview doesn't do anything to change my perception of Dan Schneider, or anyone else's, really, I imagine, because it's still nothing. This isn't really an interview. It's just a PR piece disguised as an interview. It's just more despicable garbage here. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Again, the docuseries is called Quiet on Set. It's out now. And just kind of wanted to go over it a little bit. That's it. So yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. I might check it out. But Road to 2K helped brother out. Like, we've been known he was a weirdo, so I thought more evidence came out. I get that is more evidence. I thought it was gonna be like more. I don't know what I was expecting, but we already knew he was a weirdo. So this new docuseries, I might have to check it out, see what's good. But Road 2K out, we're gonna done, but we